Have you guys heard that NATO needs to increase its budget and expand its military might due to the threat posed by Russia? If you guys don't remember, because, I don't know, some people have really short memories, but before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was this very prevalent narrative that Russia could, like, literally invade Western Europe and the Baltics and Ukraine and Poland, etc., and take them in 3 days, is what they commonly said, based on a report which we're going to be looking at in a second. And that idea was used to push the idea that European countries all need to like massively mobilize their military and stuff, and increase defense spending and stuff. Russia would overrun NATO and European war, report warns. 2 years before, like when I first saw this headline, I remember I like tweeted out saying like, this is fucking absurd. You know, obviously this is insane. Like, Russia wouldn't win a war against like fucking Germany alone, let alone overrun NATO. And I was saying that even before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Like, if Russia started a war in the Baltics, NATO would lose quickly. How? And this was, of course, based on a report from the RAND Corporation, which is literally an arms industry think tank, right? An American non-profit global policy think tank created by the Douglas Aircraft Company. So, obviously, this has been proven wrong in the most ridiculous way, and tragic, really, way possible, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So, the only reason why Russia's invasion of Crimea worked out is because Ukraine decided not to fight it. Very wisely, I might add. That was a good thing, because it probably wouldn't have gone very well for the people of the region and the region itself. So they just didn't fight it. They just basically hanged out outside. I mean, they probably couldn't have fought it anyway, because Russia had fucking a naval base there and military troops stationed there already. Part of an agreement that they had with Ukraine. But like, once Russia actually tried to invade Ukraine proper, they're essentially stalemated right now against Ukraine alone with a supply of weapons from Western countries. Ukrainian troops fighting with Western armaments alone were able to stop Russia, essentially. Obviously, they haven't won the war. They might in the future. But let's just say that they aren't exactly winning a war, right? They're definitely not winning a war quickly. If anything, they are fighting a war that has driven to a halt, where Russia's strategy at this point seems to be to hope that Ukraine just runs out of soldiers or something. So the narrative used to be this: we need to increase defense spending, we need to make our militaries bigger, we need to basically give the arms industries lots of money because Russia, the boogeyman, the big boogeyman in the East. Now that Russia has been proven completely incapable of doing anything even close to what these people said that it could, the new narrative is somehow exactly the same. The EU and NATO, etc., need to invest more in defense. How does that make any sense? The only, possible opponent they have on the entire European continent is Russia. Russia has proven completely incapable of even invading Ukraine. It's much smaller, much poorer neighbor, and apparently Europe needs to gear up more for defense, apparently. Defense is what they call it. Now, defense has always been a euphemism. This is not why they're doing this. They're not gearing up to fight Russia. Europe doesn't need any more investment in defense to fight Russia. They didn't even need to fight Russia. Literally, just by sending arms to Ukraine, that alone was enough to stop Russia. Could you fucking imagine how much worse, the Russian invasion would have gone if it wasn't Ukraine alone and it was some Baltic states sending troops or something? It would be a fucking joke, okay? Russia's military capacity has been totally overestimated. Not just that, but the only real thing that Russia has going for it geopolitically is that military capacity. It doesn't have the economic reach of the US or the EU. It has military capacity and it has some natural resources. But a country that exports natural resources as one of its primary means of geopolitical leverage is not exactly, a country that's very high on the totem pole of empire. If you're exporting natural resources rather than improved products, that is an indication that you are pretty low on like the economic pecking order in the world. You know, certainly not the worst, but Russia is hardly and wasn't before on the level of like the EU and US, etc. So we have Russia, a country. The only thing they really have going for it geopolitically is that they have nukes, that they had a big army that was supposedly like formidable just because they inherited it from the Soviet Union. But when push came to shove and they finally faced like a bigger country than like Georgia, they couldn't even win the war. All that they could do is just cause fucking chaos and mayhem and misery. But they certainly cannot take over Ukraine. So how does it make sense that we need to increase defense spending in the wake of this? How does that make any sense? It obviously doesn't. The enemy is both too strong and too weak, as you can see. And these
Communism
are
is based.
You know, you see everywhere, right? This sort of contradictory idea that the Russian orcs are getting destroyed by the valiant Ukrainians. But at the same time, Europe needs to like become more militaristic to deal with the Russian threat. When clearly that, if anything, what this has proven is that in any further investment in so-called defense, which is really offense, in Europe, the US, the West in general, isn't going to be to fight Russia, because they are already and have always been more than capable of fighting Russia. Way more than capable. Like, you know, if every single fucking EU country reduced their military budget by half, they would still be more than capable of fighting Russia. It's not for fighting Russia. So you have to ask, what is it for? Well, when it comes down to it, it's for imperialism in other places. That's what it's for a potential invasion in the future, a potential intervention a la Libya or Afghanistan, that sort of thing. It's for really just like having you know, more of a military stationed in more places around the world represents a threat to other countries, even if it's never actually used, that makes them more inclined to do what you want. So none of this has anything to do with defense, because obviously Europe is perfectly capable of being defended from Russia. It was before too, when they were making these fucking ridiculous articles about how NATO would lose a war to Russia. The most absurd thing I've ever heard in my life. Fucking Foreign Policy magazine, give me a break. You know, the enemy is both too strong and too weak. Russia has been destroyed by the valiant Ukrainians and proven to be a paper tiger. So the saying of many liberals goes. I mean, that is true. But then their logic isn't like, you know, that shows that we don't need to invest as much in so-called defense. Their logic is, it shows that we need to invest more in defense somehow. Very sensical. It's not about fighting Russia. It is about having a greater capacity to do imperialism elsewhere in the world. It's that simple.